Have you ever heard of the phrase invest in yourself? This idea of pouring into yourself is really popular in the self-help sphere. And while I understood it in concept, I had a hard time using it in application, especially when it came to my finances. I had lots of questions, like what was an appropriate amount to spend on this type of investment? Or even what was the difference between investing in oneself and a want? One thing I knew for sure though, is how a person spends their money is an indicator of what they value or what they find important. And I wanted to be more aware of how I was spending mine. So I created a money framework to structure my finances in a way that would not only encourage me to spend differently, but think differently. This is the financial pyramid. It is composed of 4 tiers: expenses, savings, values, and wants, and takes inspiration from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow believed people naturally start at the bottom of the pyramid, first seeking for their basic needs to be met. Once those are satisfied, then they naturally ascend to the next tier of the pyramid. The financial pyramid uses a similar approach, where the bottom 2 tiers focus more on financial stability, while the top 2 tiers are more financially flexible and individualized. Let's take a closer look into each of the tiers. The bottom, most foundational tier of the pyramid is expenses. And an expense is defined as a cost associated with maintaining a basic standard of living. Like the bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these are the essential items that help keep your life healthy, safe, and functional. Examples of these expenses could be housing, food, transportation, insurance. And I encourage you, take the time to figure out how much your expenses are costing you on a monthly basis. Because the goal is to keep your expenses as low and as lean as possible so that money can be freed up for other categories. But if you don't know how much your expenses are costing you, it's going to be hard to make changes. Knowing this number can also be an indicator of whether you have an income problem, meaning you're not bringing in enough money to properly pay for all of your expenses, or if you have a spending problem, meaning that you are bringing in enough money, but maybe it's not being allocated to the proper places. But once you know your numbers and can properly pay for your expenses, it's time to ascend to the next tier of the pyramid, which is savings. Savings is money that is purposely set aside for future use. And in the financial pyramid, the savings tier is divided into 2 main sections. The first section, financial security, creates distance between you and financial disaster when life happens. This means saving 3 to 6 months worth of expenses to create an emergency fund. And also saving for older you in a retirement plan, such as a 401k or a Roth IRA. On the other side of the savings tier is financial prevention. This is money that is set aside for planned expenses, such as a doctor copay or car maintenance. Setting money aside for these things gets rid of trying to figure out where the money will come from later. And peace of mind is everything, especially when it comes to finances. Now that the foundation is set, it's time to move on to my favorite tier, values. Values are principles, beliefs, and ideas that a person finds important in their life. They guide a person's decisions, actions, and overall behavior. And as we grow as individuals, it's important to invest in that growth. Actually put action behind our words. And that's what this category does. These are the investments that move our life forward and make life feel more full. But before you spend, take a minute and write out what's important to you. What does your ideal self look like? And what would you need to do now to become more like that future version of yourself? In my life, for example, learning is a very important value of mine. I always enjoy pushing myself out of my comfort zone, learning new skills, and gaining new perspectives. So when it comes to spending money in the values tier, I've done things like taking classes at a community college and going to museums to learn more about art and history. How the money is spent in this category is completely up to you. But a rule of thumb is whatever purchase you make should connect back to a value of yours. Now, last but not least, at the top of the pyramid is wants. A want is something to be desired. It's not essential, but it's like the cherry on top of a sundae. It's good to have. Examples of this could be splurging on a clothing item or going out for a fun night with friends. Wants don't have to be as deep as values, but I still want to emphasize intentionality and accountability. And what that means when it comes to our spending is shifting our mindset from buying everything to buying less and buying better. That's the pyramid. And once you know how all the pieces work individually, it becomes so much easier to create a plan. And though my spending isn't perfect, I do feel more control of my life and my money. So comment down below, where do you stand on the financial pyramid, and what would you spend money on in your values tier? Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe for more videos about money, business, and building a life you love. Until next time, bye.